Hello everyone and welcome to Quality Old Games. Today we are making a list of my top 5 enjoyable factions in Rome Total War. And, I have to say that I would put perhaps all of the Roman factions quite high on the list, because I just enjoy playing as Romans. But number 5 we have Scipii. And actually I'm not going to put all 3 Roman factions here. And for Scipii, I think I like playing with them mostly because of the building roster they have. So whenever I want to kind of try to test what's the ultimate army composition that Romans can have, the best upgrades that can be had there and so on and so forth, Scipii are my choice, and that's mainly because of the temple chain. Actually, all of the pantheons can actually upgrade the weapons and armor of the units, and you can get even some experience points as well. But if you build Pantheon of Neptune, you can get those Dekiris, Corvus, Quinqueremes, so the kind of superstar destroyers of Mediterranean, antique Mediterranean. So yeah, a fleet made out of those Corvus, Quinqueremes or Dekiris will be kind of devastating fleet. So really the upgrades for units and those unique ships are kind of nice at some point. And furthermore, in campaign wise, I think the Scipii starting position is, well, not exactly challenging, but if you kind of move against the Carthage and most likely Syracuse as you are intended, you end up here in Northern Africa, and especially if Brutii managed to advance rather well in Greece and furthermore to Asia Minor, and then if the Julii can advance rapidly against the barbarians, you may end up in a situation in the civil war that you have this Northern Africa, Sicily, perhaps some parts of Spain as well, and then you will be having quite a large block of Julii and quite large block of Brutii facing you. So the setup for the civil war might be one of the most exciting ones if you are playing as Scipii. So those are the reasons why I like playing with Scipii. And of course, you get quite a bit of money to play with since these settlements in this area can be rather lucrative in terms of trade and so on, since most of them ports can be built in most of them and so on. So yeah, rather nice. So that was number 5. Let's move to number 4, which for me, at least at the moment, is Germania. And one of the main things for my liking of Germania here is that you can keep kind of a fast pace while playing at them. Because their best units, for instance, Beer Warband is tier 1, and those others are tier 3, you can get quite quickly your hands on them, especially if you manage to capture some high tier civilized settlements such as Tylis, Thessalonica, perhaps Ariminum, Arretium, perhaps even Alasia, Batavium, and so on. So it's nice to get your hands on kind of into the ultimate army rather early in the game. At the same time, playing with Germania can offer some challenge as well, because your starting settlements are rather meager in terms of population, and if some of those earliest battles go badly awry, you may end up in a situation that you don't actually have population from which to draw the army. So there is kind of let's call it suspension factor at the beginning of the campaign, because you just need to succeed in those earliest battles, or you will be in your back foot for quite a while. Of course, when you get things going, you can cross the Britons and Gauls rather easily, and perhaps the campaign is on the easier side. But still, especially the beginning makes it rather enjoyable one. And of course, in some of the battles when you have, well, some warbands and for instance, the Gauls are outnumbering you quite heavily, it's rather nice to try to perform with those spear warbands so well that you can clearly beat the vastly superior, at least numerical superior, enemy army. And of course, in the late game, if Romans manage to get Marian reforms, Greeks and Macedonians manage to get their armored hoplites, royal pikemen, etc., out, battles against these factions might actually be quite intriguing as well. Third, we have Dacia, and actually this is the campaign I'm doing at the moment. And I have been rather pleasantly surprised how enjoyable it has been. Dacia is one of the harder factions to play with, and I think mostly because of that, I made my armies mostly out of missile units, at least in the early campaign. Because warbands, Volksmen, even chosen warbands just don't cut it against phalanx pikemen or armored hoplites or even basic hoplites too well. So it has been rather interesting to do the campaign with those missile units only, and perhaps even learn to use them quite a bit better. I have learned at least some ways how to thwart the Scythian horse archers. Campus Scythi has seen many battles where the Scythians have tried to take the settlement without succeeding, I might add. And also the limitations of Dacian roster kind of mean that in the end game, which we are currently on, one has to play perhaps to the best of one's ability to be able to outmaneuver the, for instance, Roman armies, because quite often the Dacian unit quality is quite a bit worse than Roman unit quality. And combine that the factor of very hard difficulty adds more attack and morale to Roman armies, then you just need to have the proper army composition to be able to take on the Romans. Because a solid infantry line usually just won't cut it if, for instance, you don't have superior general or something like that. You don't micro well enough. And I think one pleasant thing here has been also that the monetary situation has been relatively tough throughout the campaign. So I have been forced to prioritize what to do in the campaign. I just don't have the money to build all of the settlements to the level I would like to. And I just don't have the money to train all the troops I would like to. So that has led to the prioritization and also most likely to the need to use those archer warbands, early game archer unit, quite far in the campaign. And still, as well, the balance here is because of capturing several larger settlements in recent turns, but still I'm struggling with money and need to consider where to focus those resources so that I can keep assaults going. So, Dacia number 3 for me. Then, next we have number 2 position, we have Seleucid Empire. And, well, there are two main things why I like playing with this faction. The first one is the rather difficult starting position. So as you can see here on the minimap, the empire is rather wide and very short, if those terms can be used. So there are no kind of... you basically are surrounded by the enemies, because in very hard difficulty, most of Greek cities, Pontus, Armenia, Parthia, Egypt will declare war on you, and you will be surrounded by enemies. And initially you won't have any safe flank or secure border in your empire. So that kind of makes the starting position with Seleucid Empire rather intriguing. And of course you have many possibilities to get lucrative settlements, roads, many wonders. You already have hanging gardens. You can get pharaohs and the Great Pyramid and Sphinx and so on. But in order to get at least these wonders, you need to wade through quite strong enemy armies. So this kind of forces, the starting position forces you to play with early game units, utilize them to maximum efficiency, even though those early game units are not that good in the campaign or in the overall game overall. But you don't have anything else. If you try to kind of focus, for instance, Seleucia or Antioch to get high tier units, it will take time and perhaps the resources you would need to use in training troops and actually protecting your borders. So that's kind of it's always nice when you have to make trade-offs. What's the better decision for your overall campaign objectives? And in order to get those good units, you actually need to upgrade Antioch to tier 4 settlement. Well, I mean, you need to get 7,000 more population, and you need to upgrade the unit producing facilities as well. And it's going to take quite a long time. And of course, if you train troops, then the population is going to decrease and so on. So it's not difficult. But then again, if you and when you get to the late game, it's going to be interesting because of the multifaceted roster that Seleucid Empire has. So you're going to have those Silver Shield Legionaries, Cataphracts. Well, Scythed's chariots are available quite early, so that's rather nice. Helps quite a lot in the early campaign. But also you can have armored elephants, war elephants, and so on. So a really powerful late game roster, but the problem is, can you get into the late game? So defending the borders, perhaps deciding to abandon some of the provinces, those are tough decisions that just must be made. And of course there are some rebel settlements available here, so you don't perhaps end up in war quite in the earliest turns, but these settlements are not really that good. So once again, the question is, should you go and grab them and perhaps struggle with public order in them? Or should you just bolster your armies and begin to face the enemies one by one? So the tough decisions kind of make Seleucid Empire my number 2 favorite or most enjoyable faction to play. And as number 1, I think you may have guessed it, is the Julii. And there are several reasons. Well, perhaps the first and most sentimental one is that Julii is the first faction I played the game with some 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago. So there is this side as well. And since then, Julii has been the faction I enjoy playing most. Of course, as Roman faction, it's not that challenging to play as Julii. And if you compare Roman armies, even Primarian Roman armies against barbarian rosters, especially commanded by AI, well, I think we know that it's quite rare and far between when Roman units will fare worse than barbarian units. But still, there is that something when playing with Julii. And of course, it has to do with the red coloring, as the Roman legionaries are always depicted wearing those red cloaks, and so the red color is kind of, at least in my mind, combined to that. Hey, these are the real Romans in here, and so on. And also the Julii campaign is, relatively interesting, because you need to struggle with population and money a bit more than if compared, for instance, to Phrygia, which can get the rather rich Greece and Macedonian cities quite early in the game. But Julii, if they are being played as they are intended, then you need to move against barbarians, and of course Gauls can muster rather large armies and can cause some real problems at some point. And of course, when you are capturing these barbarian settlements all over the Western Europe, in terms of civil war, you will be having most likely the most of geographical area, perhaps most of cities as well, but then you will be facing the Phrygiae and Scipii that have larger cities, most likely more income, and most likely better units if their armies are in proper places. So quite often in the civil war it rather ends before the other Roman factions can bring their armies properly to bear. But if they manage to do that, then there are bound to be quite a few Praetorian cohorts, some urban cohorts, and so on, especially from Phrygiae, and fighting against those with the troops you usually have from this area, which is most likely early legionary cohorts, perhaps boosted with some archer auxilia, some legionary cohorts, and so on, some perhaps Roman cavalry, legionary cavalry, and so on from this area. But the enemy armies will be outclassing your armies. So those battles will be quite interesting in those cases. And overall, I think if and when I will play once again Roman campaign, it most likely will be with Julii. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the content, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Feel free to post comments, make suggestions about future campaigns, share your thoughts about your favorite factions in Rome Total War, and so on. Have a great rest of the day. Quality Old Games out.